Hi, I'm Melissa Arronte, the Employee Practice Experience Lead at Medallia, and I'm joined today with Ian Cook from Visier, and I'm really excited to have him talk with us today about the connection between employee signals and customer experience. So Ian, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
For sure. A long-time consultant and student of how organizations thrive, and really fascinated by that whole process of how you get people working aligned to a goal so that it delivers business value. And through that career, got really pulled into, compelled by the whole notion of the analysis of people's behavior so that it affects business outcomes.
I love how you mention employee behavior and business outcomes, because really that's what employee experience is about. And when we think about a business outcome, we think about customer experience, and what an opportunity we have to understand not only the employee experience through surveys, but signals, which is why we have such a nice partnership with Visier. Can you tell us a little bit about the origins of Visier, why you founded it?
Yeah, and I think you position it nicely. When we came to found the business, we were looking at the challenge of analytics, and specifically in a way that a business person can make a decision. So we didn't look at it from the technology, like let's get the data together, let's just visualize it. We actually started with what kind of business questions do we need to answer? And all the unanswered questions were about people. Simple ones like headcount. People would be surprised at how few organizations can get a current accurate headcount that includes contingent. You would think that's mastered, but it's often not. And then it just extends from there around like the revenue that can be saved through retention, the impacts on customers that come from retention. There's just many, many unanswered questions there. So we had a passion for that space. We knew that people had a lot of unanswered questions. And so, that drew us into that space. 11 years later, it's clearly we were onto something because we've been growing like crazy.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. Excellent. So I love those examples. Now, can you say more about exactly what Visier is for people who haven't met you yet?
Yeah, and at its most simple form, we are a technology capability with domain expertise built in that gets you very quickly to answers about your people. Simple answers like who is leaving, why are they leaving, what can we make them do to stay, to more complex answers around how many heads will we need, what kind of skills do we need, how can we plan for our future. Typically used by a people analytics group within the business. But for some of our larger clients like Ubers and Legos and Unilevers of the world, they're distributing that information out to people managers to help them understand their teams, help them understand changes in their teams, and really make sure they're looking after their people well. So we are in the cloud, so it's as a service, and we take all of that heavy lifting of mashing the data together off our clients' hands and basically deliver them answers. So we get raw data, we deliver back insight, and we scale across the business.
And I think not everyone appreciates how much work that is. Previously being ahead of people analytics, taking data out of an HR information system and getting it in a format we need for reporting and analysis is quite the heavy lift.
I suspect the customer analysis group appreciate it more than most other people in the business, but yeah, people data is messy. It's messy. It changes a lot. It's not necessarily huge volumes, but the dynamics of change around changing supervisor, changing hierarchy, changes in job classification or name, like there's a mobility within the data that actually has hampered many IT groups from actually being able to be successful. It's again, we see a lot of organizations who tried to start with a build it yourself actually transition to us because they hit all of those roadblocks that we've specialized in kind of moving past. So it isn't as simple as people think. And there's also an added sensitivity of ethics and kind of privacy, which is always a lens that you have to apply.
So one of the things you mentioned, Ian, is the role of the frontline manager. And as you know, at Medallia, for customer experience data, we deliver it directly to frontline managers and often even directly to employees. So can you comment on the role of the frontline manager with Visier?
Yeah, and this is a trend that we're seeing a lot more of. It was certainly accelerated through 2020 through all of the events. The business is run by people. I know there's teams, and then most of that is actually mediated by the person who manages the team. So they need to know about the business elements, they need to know about the finance elements, they also need to know about the people elements. And kind of the HR practice has been on a journey where initially a lot of that people stuff was done by HR. That's way back in the 90s. Then that HR stuff became sort of done with HR, where HR business partner, people leader, having the conversation, running the program. As organizations have grown bigger and technology's got more sophisticated, a lot of those programs are actually being run by the manager, augmented, supported by the technology capabilities that are available. And so we're in the similar space to Medallia, where not the CX data, we're not kind of creating that stuff. We're giving them some just good, solid, basic information around compensation, promotion. Diversity is huge piece for us. And what happens when you put that in the hands of the supervisors? Instead of 5 people sitting in a room worrying about how to change diversity, you have 5 people looking at their scorecard, understanding how their decision changes that outcome. So we're a big part of actually catalyzing change, because we put the data where the decisions happen.
Great, excellent. And we did have a question coming in, Ian, and so I'm going to share it with you because I think it's a really good one. So the person says, leaders generally understand there's a connection between EX and CX. Totally, we totally agree. And so glad that leaders are recognizing that, right? We have such an opportunity here. So how do you show impact and take action at a tactical level? And so Ian's going to say more here. I'll just introduce the idea that people are often thinking EX and CX, and they're thinking about bringing 2 survey responses together. But there's greater opportunity. We talked yesterday with Ben Weber of Humanize of bringing in networks that employees use as a signal and a way to drive customer experience. And talking with Ian today, he's got some great examples he's about to share. But things like employee turnover as an example, driving customer experience in addition to survey data. So go ahead.
Yeah, we see it, and Melissa and I have talked about this at length, like a 3-legged stool. You understand the customer's experience, and you've got great signals around the employee experience, but what are the events that are actually leading to that experience? What if somebody's had 3 different supervisors in the space of 6 months? Again, a common experience. How is that affecting the experience so that you're affecting the customer experience? And so Visier's piece is really all of that event set, changes, delays, missed opportunities, all of those events that have an effect on an employee's experience of work, which will show up in the survey and be described by them. But if you don't necessarily have the change in data and the movement behind it, it's hard to sometimes triangulate. The other piece that we see as valuable is using that event set to decide where to orchestrate. I mean, there are literally thousands of touch points on the employee. Whereas if you look at a data stream around events, something as simple as when people leave, often an experience measure will be put around why are you leaving? But they'll put that in at 90 days because kind of 90 days is the classic standard. Well, what if everybody's leaving at 75 days? If you have the data to say when do these events occur, you then get to orchestrate the right point to actually listen to why the event is happening. And so there's this, as we discussed, there's this really important 3-way view where customer experience is what we're all driving for. Everybody's in the same boat. Employee experience is what creates it. Events that affect the employee are what you can change in order to improve the experience. And so that's that really holistic picture, which is our excitement of partnering with Medallia. Like the better together is definitely a key component here.
Right. I loved how you said that, Ian. Something as simple as an employee having multiple manager changes. If we only look at the survey data, we just understand that employees are feeling differently. Right? And we can measure that sentiment, but we really need to know the events that are happening to understand that it's related to a manager change. And there's so many changes employees go through, as you're mentioning. I mean, turnover is the classic one that everyone in CX thinks about. Employee turnover impacts customer experience. But what about transfer of employees or promotion of employees or performance rating change? You can say more. Go ahead.
and what people understand is that turnover has a direct effect on that individual. What is less well known is a thing called turnover contagion. Whereas if I'm in a group where lots of people are leaving, I actually start to question, like, why am I still here? It becomes that sinking ship analogy where everybody else is departing from this group. Am I weird because I want to stay? So it's not just that the individuals who leave have an event effect. It's actually they have a downstream impact on the people who stay. So you get large amounts of exits that has an effect on those who are still there. that means you need to respond. That means you need to understand the effect and then have an appropriate kind of response to that. So there's untold amounts of insight that are available by putting those two things together, for sure.
Right. And then it gives us the opportunity to proactively take action when we know there's going to be an employee transfer or a manager change, so that we maintain our customer experience or potentially even improve it, but that we don't have this, unintended impact on customers that we could have known about, because the data is so easily available.
Exactly. And that's probably an example we should talk about. A banking customer of ours who did some very similar to what we're describing, looked at using machine learning that we have, an AI component that predicts who's going to leave, focus on a very specific customer facing population, ran a program to try and keep more of those people, used listening to understand what was going on for them, and used the event data to understand who was at risk, changed the dynamic in terms of maintaining the relationship with the customer, which led to countless amounts of revenue. We don't have exact numbers, but it was millions and millions of dollars in revenue that came into this retail bank through that combination of what's the event, how do we understand it, how do we make it better, and the downstream effect. So really great example of that EX to CX event kind of stream, and how analytics across that process has a measured effect on the customer, which leads to revenue, which is, again, always the goal.
Excellent. And we're getting another question, Ian. I really like this question, so I'm going to raise it. What are the major events in EX that have the greatest impact on CX? And the one thing I want to mention in this answer, Ian, is as we've talked about this, events is one thing that can come from Visier, but there's so many more things, demographics, et cetera. So I'm going to let you answer that.
I think one of the biggest impacts to watch for is manager change. I've spoken to lots and lots of people where, I've had 3 managers in the space of 4 months. I don't know if I'm coming or going. What often it looks on paper like a really simple change, like, we'll just plug so-and-so over here and put them in there, like, done. On paper, it's simple. But humans aren't like that. We have relationships, we have histories, we have all of this cultural system around us that plugging in a new manager can be disruptive. It's like, I just knew which way was up, and now I've got to work out how to engage with this individual. They keep changing things on me. I just don't like change, so I just don't like what's going on. Like, I think that one of those things, we have a measure called manager instability, which is a rate for how much managers are changing. And again, that's a really key piece. And then sometimes it's events and sometimes it's delays in events. So things like being passed over for promotion. The world of work is very much more about growth and experience and trajectory on experience. And so the other thing is that we see have a large impact is like, everybody around me is progressing and I'm not progressing. Like, why is that? That's not okay. That's not fair. So it's not necessarily that it's the event that, I got promoted, that has an effect. It's that I didn't, or others are, and they're moving faster. And so it's often the gaps around the event that are really the telling pieces in terms of affecting that experience. So I would say manager change and promotion are 2 very, very substantial drivers of experience for an employee.
And those are event based, but we also have things about demographics, and you'll have more examples than I will, Ian. But thinking just an insurance company we worked with, we found better customer experience for insurance salespeople who felt high autonomy on the survey, were more experienced, and had a multi-site manager, meaning the manager wasn't always present. So they actually got to deliver the customer experience they knew was right with a little less guidance.
Yes, we all like autonomy, that's for sure.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of others that you've studied where you've seen the impact in customer experience?
The healthcare sector is a big one for us as well, where patient care, and a lot of that was more around overwork. So absence driven to overtime driven to, which nursing population was actually delivering the service. That links back through to some standardized measures in that area, a thing called HCAHPS. And so again, a lot of our customers have looked at that. It's a staffing volume question, but it's also around like, how are we actually getting the right number of people? What they actually found in this circumstances, they were employing too few people permanently, relying too much on agency and not taking into account, again, either absence days or peaks in volume and various other things. So what they ended up doing, which was probably counterintuitive for the finance people, was hiring more people and paying people a little bit more. But the downstream effect, again, millions of dollars saved in terms of overtime not spent. So by trying to be too tight on the employee population, from a finance perspective, they end up spending in the wrong places. So again, an analysis of that whole dynamic linked back up to how is this affecting patients, the core thing that we care about, like making sure that people get the care they need and they feel cared for at the same time. It was a great example.
That really is a great example, Ian. I've seen similar things with our customers in banking and looking at trying to keep the staffing to a minimum, but then we have so much overtime and we actually have lower customer experience because we actually find employees complaining to customers, right? They develop such a nice relationship coming into the branch regularly. They ask about vacations, weddings, right? They start talking about, can you believe it? I'm here again. I've already worked 40 hours this week.
Exactly. Yeah. And important things to keep track of, both on the commentary and then does the data back it up, and starting to look at that, not just a single comment, but a massive comments, and then the actual event data, the aggregate data behind it. So you get both the stated view and the data view, and then you really know where you're going. You really know how to make an effect.
Right. Another example of that, and I'm sure you have many others, I think about is scheduling. So we can look at scheduling data and see that the schedules are covered. But what we're missing is the employee's perception of that scheduling, which can be, of course, so important to them. It's their life. How do they manage everything outside of work, and even affects their incentive, right? So this has significant impact on customer experience.
Oh, for sure. Yep. And again, allowing people flexibility. I think that's also one thing we've learned through 2020 is trying to control less and give people choice more tends to actually fill the gaps and create a better experience for employees, which, as we know, rolls off onto the customer.
Excellent, Ian. I just love talking to you about this. We're getting more questions that I think we could answer in a Meet the Expert session. So both Ian and I are available, as well as some of his colleagues, Lexi Martin and Caitlin
Bixby.
Caitlin Bixby. So thank you so much, Ian. So much opportunity on employee experience and employee signals impacting customer experience.
It's welcome. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, Melissa, and I hope this has been instructive for folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.